Hello everyone, and welcome to the Chapter 18 overview. This is going to be on the circulatory system and the respiratory system. Take a look at the lesson objectives that we have down here, and we're going to be talking about the heart, the blood, the oxygen which flows to every one of your cells through the vessels called arteries, veins, capillaries. In the previous chapter, we talked about biodigital, the resource for anatomy and physiology. This is a screenshot that I've taken out of biodigital, and you'll notice these little white nodules at the end. These structures right here are your lungs, and inside there are these little white structures called alveoli. They're very, very important for the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide that keeps us alive and that supplies every cell with the needed oxygen. A lot of people are under the mistaken notion that the only reason you have the circulatory system is to move your red blood cells and oxygen around. That's, of course, one of the most important reasons you have a circulatory system, but it also moves your hormones around. It also moves nutrients from digested food around, and it also moves the cellular wastes around your body. So besides the oxygen, which is super important, we move hormones, nutrients, and cellular waste through the circulatory system. The heart of a human being is made of 4 chambers. Right here we have the right ventricle below the right atrium, the left ventricle below the left atrium. And you'll notice in between those chambers there are valves. That's what these patches of tissue are, here and here, here and here. And those valves are one way. They let blood flow in, but then they backstop them so that blood can't back up in your heart. So these are one-way valves. This is a muscular pump that moves your blood through the body. In this diagram, we're taking a look at the structures that move the blood. So here's our heart here. It's flowing into a aorta, or a large artery here, smaller, smaller, smaller. We get down to the capillaries, and then they start their way back through venules, through veins, through big veins like the vena cava, up back into the heart. So it's a circuitous route all around the body. And it's very important to note that the colors here, red, generally a reddish color within any sort of medical illustration, notes oxygen-rich blood, which is flowing from the heart, and a blue color is oxygen-depleted blood, which is flowing back to the heart. And there are 2 major circulation systems. The one is called the pulmonary circulation system, and this is part that flows between your heart and lungs. And the systemic circulation system is that which carries blood between the heart and the rest of the body, so every other cell. So make sure you note what the function of the pulmonary circulation is and the systemic. This diagram will be in the quiz, and this is a diagram of your systemic circulation. So let's take a look at this. Here's our heart, and notice the largest artery moving out of the heart is called the aorta, and as it branches, it's moving blood up to our head and to our arms. The other side of the branch comes down here below the back of the heart. It's called the descending aorta, and this is taking blood to our legs and also our internal organs. This is the pulmonary part of the circulatory system, and this is what's moving it between the left and right lung. Very important, as we said, was getting oxygen to all those cells, and this is an illustration of the cells in your body. These are the red blood cells, and these here are the white blood cells. So make sure you read about the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and also the other parts of the blood, like the platelets that help with clotting. We'll talk briefly about blood type. You may know your blood type, and blood type is caused by certain molecules right on the surface of the red blood cells. There's A and B, and if you can have one or both, or you can have neither. Read about that. There's also another factor, another common antigen called Rh, and Rh stands for rhesus blood type. Make sure you read and understand those. We mentioned this a few chapters back during evolution. We mentioned that not only are outside shapes and characteristics of plants and animals obvious as they evolve, but also the insides, and that's true of the circulatory system. Take a look at this fish circulatory system. Fish don't have a 4-chamber heart, they have a 2-chamber heart, and that 2-chamber heart is right here. Amphibians have a 3-chamber heart, 1, 2, and this is really one chamber. There's a beginning of a wall here. Starts during reptiles. Reptiles have what's called 1 to like a 3.5 chamber heart, and by the time mammals have evolved, their circulatory system is a full 4-chamber heart. Just as the circulatory system evolved, we also have the evolution of brains. Here you can see, we've graded these out. You can take a guess at which brains are that of a mammal or bird as opposed to a bony fish. But brains evolved too. The parts have stayed the same because they have the same functions within the body, but the size of the brain and the abilities of the brain change over time. Lungs have also changed. We're going to talk about lungs in a little bit, and these are showing you different ways to get oxygen into the blood of different organisms. This animation, which is really well done, is about how the heart actually pumps blood. I'd like you to watch this, and what happens. One of the number 2 killers of human beings in America is heart attacks and heart disease. This talks about what happens during a heart attack. So please watch these 2 that relate to important issues with the circulatory system. So a little while ago in our course, we met Daniel Kraft, who is from Stanford University. Here is another Stanford alumni, and his name is Manu Prakash. Manu is one of the most creative inventors going these days, and Manu has invented a 50-cent microscope that folds from one sheet of paper that have the lenses in them. It's just an amazing, amazing story. He's a good speaker. I'd like you to listen to his talk and learn what Manu is doing with his small team at Stanford. So in 18.2, the respiratory system, we're going to look at these lesson objectives. We're going to be looking at respiration, how it's different from cell respiration, and the organs that take place. We're going to mention a couple words with this diagram that I'd like you to take a look at. So here is where the nasal cavity and the mouth cavity come down into the cartilage, which is called the trachea. And this trachea comes down, and the air that you breathe in splits into a left side and to a right side. And this main bronchi, the trachea is here. There's a main bronchi here and here. But then let's follow these all the way to the end to this little area here. And then in this diagram, it's expanded up. These are alveoli. These are those little white sacs that you saw in one of the first pictures in the course that we looked at from Biodigital. This is where, as we say, the rubber meets the road. And you see these tiny little red lines. That's where the oxygen-rich blood is exchanging the oxygen and taking in oxygen from the air. That's where it happens. So alveoli and diffusion is very, very important right in here. We have also, I'd like to note here that the effect that COVID-19 is having, and that's because that virus usually, not all the time, but usually starts in a respiratory tract. So read about this and how COVID can affect us. So let's look at a close-up of alveoli. These are tiny, tiny sacs. Here comes the blood in from the body. It wants to get rid of carbon dioxide, which it's taken in from the cells, and it wants to pick up oxygen. So here it comes down here, and it's close enough. This is a really, really, really tiny area here. It's close enough that through diffusion, carbon dioxide will come out, and oxygen will be picked up by the red blood cells. This is a really, really important process. And keeping these alveoli healthy, keeping them non-damaged, keeping them free of liquid. Alveoli coming into liquid can be really, really difficult, especially with certain diseases like pneumonia. We want to keep those as healthy as possible. So gas exchange is very important to a process called homeostasis. And homeostasis is the body's ability to keep a stable environment. So the gas exchange is needed to provide the cells with oxygen that they need for cell respiration. And as you know, we've talked about this a couple times, cells can't survive very long without oxygen. So read this. Also, pH plays a role in keeping our body healthy. You have a muscle called the diaphragm, which is just underneath the lungs. And as that diaphragm contracts, the chest expands and air flows in. And as it relaxes, we exhale. There are some common diseases of the respiratory system, such as asthma or pneumonia or emphysema. So take a look at those and make sure you read those. This is a diagram of what happens at the alveoli level in pneumonia. Notice that these these structures that normally would have free air in them fill with fluid and blood cells. Really, really dangerous. Healthy, they would be totally clear. And with emphysema, the actual walls of the alveoli break down. The membranes where the gas exchange takes place breaks down. It's really, really tough. And if you've seen people that are walking around with oxygen tanks, usually, not always, but usually that means that they were smokers for a long time, and gradually the smoke has broken down the cell walls of the alveoli. Very, very dangerous situation. They can't get enough oxygen in. That's why instead of breathing in 20% oxygen, which is what our air has, they're breathing in 80 to 90% oxygen. The rest of the presentation has a number of TED Ed talks linked to this particular presentation. So I'd like you to watch these, take notes on them. This is one which talks about the flow of oxygen into our cells, as does this one, but this one is talking about how relaxation, how we can control, semi-control our breathing rate, which will help us remain healthier. Speaking of healthier, we would love for people to smoke less. That would be better for them, better for our society, better for everybody if we smoked less. And a number of years ago, the government asked or told cigarette makers that they had to put on warning labels. They also had to put out commercials. Now these are right here. This is linked to the 21 to the 40th most positive commercials for anti-smoking commercials, if you want to look at that. The top 20 are a little bit tough to take, so if you're a little bit squeamish, you might want to stay away from that. And the last one reverts back to the digestive tract, and it's how, this is related to the Ed Young reading that you're doing, how food that you eat affects your gut. So take a look at these. Good luck on the quiz. Remember, this is just a short overview of the chapter. You should be reading, taking notes on, and if some of this information is totally new to you, if you've never heard of it before and you're learning it for the first time, watch those animations more than once. Watch them 2 or 3 times. That will really help the learning take place. Good luck on the quiz, everybody.